ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese, Ghostly Tales from Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you a story called Cuixian. Liang Yuzai was originally from Shaanxi but later ended up in Jinan, Shandong province, making a living as a small trader. He had neither a wife nor children nor any land, living a solitary life. On a day in early April, he joined the villagers to climb Mount Zhai. During this season, the mountain was crowded with pilgrims, bustling and lively. There were also some male and female laypeople leading around 100 or so men and women devotees, all kneeling in a disorderly manner before the Buddha statue. They would stay kneeling there until they had finished burning an incense stick, a practice known as kneeling incense. Liang Yuzai noticed a young woman among the pilgrims, about 17 or 18 years old, with a beautiful appearance. He couldn't help but feel affection for her. Pretending to be a pilgrim, he knelt down beside the young woman. After a while, he feigned weakness in his knees and deliberately reached out to grasp the young woman's small foot. The young woman turned her head, seemingly annoyed, and moved a few steps to try to avoid him while still kneeling. Liang Yuzai moved closer while kneeling, attempting to get nearer to her. After a while, he reached out for her foot again. Realizing this, the young woman immediately stood up, stopped her worship, and left. Liang Yuzai also stood up and followed her out, but found that she had disappeared into the crowd. Feeling disappointed and dejected, Liang Yuzai continued his way. On the way, Liang Yuzai saw the young woman again, this time accompanied by an old lady who seemed to be her mother. He quickly followed them. As the mother and daughter walked and talked, the old lady said, "It's wonderful that you've come to pay your respects to the goddess. You don't have any younger siblings, so I only hope that you will receive the goddess's protection and be blessed with a good husband in the future. As long as he is filial to his elders, it doesn't matter if he's not from a wealthy family." Liang Yuzai, feeling pleased, slowly approached and engaged in conversation with the old lady, asking her many questions enthusiastically. The old lady introduced herself as Mrs. Yun, and the young woman's name was Cuixian, her daughter. They lived about 40 miles west of the mountain. Liang Yuzai said, "The mountain path is difficult, and you are elderly, while your daughter has delicate feet. How will you manage to get home today?" The old lady replied, "It is indeed getting late. We can stay at her uncle's house for the night." Liang Yuzai, summoning his courage, said, "I heard you mention finding a son-in-law, and that you don't mind if he is poor or of low status. I am still unmarried and wonder if I might be to your liking." The old lady asked her daughter's opinion, but Cuixian did not answer. After a few more inquiries, Cuixian said, "This man is of little fortune and behaves in a licentious manner, revealing a shallow and fickle nature. I cannot marry such a cold-hearted man as a wife." Liang Yuzai, hearing this, quickly declared his sincerity and pledged his honesty, even swearing by the setting sun. The old lady, seeing his earnestness, was pleased and agreed to the marriage without further consideration. Cuixian was unhappy but did not outright refuse, merely showing her displeasure. Her mother, both reluctantly and soothingly, patted her back. Liang Yuzai then continued to show his attentiveness. He took money from his pocket to hire 2 mountain palanquins, carrying the mother and daughter while he walked behind, behaving like a servant. During the difficult parts of the journey, Liang Yuzai scolded the bearers of the palanquins, ensuring that they did not jostle or sway, attending to their needs meticulously. Soon, they arrived at a village. The old lady invited Liang Yuzai to the daughter's uncle's home. The uncle, an elderly man, and the aunt, who appeared to be of a similar age, came out to greet them. Mrs. Yun called them brother and sister-in-law, and said, "This Liang Yuzai is my son-in-law. Today is a good day, we need not choose another auspicious date. Let them get married tonight." The uncle was delighted and treated Liang Yuzai to food and drinks. After dinner, they dressed Cuixian in fine clothes and sent her out. They then prepared the bedding for the new couple and encouraged them to go to bed early. Cuixian told Liang Yuzai, "I originally knew you were a heartless person, but under pressure from my mother, I've ended up marrying you on a whim. If you behave well in the future, I can stay with you for life." Liang Yuzai smiled and nodded in agreement. The next morning, Cuixian's mother told Liang Yuzai, "You should go home first. I will bring my daughter along later." Liang Yuzai returned home and cleaned the house. Soon after, Mrs. Yun indeed brought Cuixian to him. When the mother and daughter entered the house, they found it completely bare. Mrs. Yun said to Liang Yuzai, "How can you two live in such conditions? I must quickly go back and bring some money to help alleviate your difficulties." With that, she left. The next day, several male and female servants arrived at Liang's home, bringing clothes, food, and household items, filling the rooms completely. They left without eating, leaving only a maid behind. From then on, Liang Yuzai enjoyed basic comforts, but he continued to lead an idle life. He gathered several local ruffians daily to drink and gamble, and eventually, he began to steal Cuixian's jewelry, such as hairpins and earrings, to use as gambling stakes. Despite Cuixian's repeated advice, he paid no heed. Over time, Cuixian became disinclined to argue with him, and instead, she vigilantly guarded her box as if guarding against thieves. One day, a gambling friend visited Liang Yuzai and was astonished upon catching a glimpse of Cuixian. Later, during their idle talk, he teased Liang Yuzai, saying, "You have the potential for great wealth and nobility, so why worry about poverty?" Liang Yuzai asked him what he meant, and the man replied, "I have seen your wife before, and she is truly as beautiful as a celestial being. Yet her appearance does not match your circumstances. If you sell her as a concubine, you could get 100 gold pieces. If you sell her to a brothel, you could get 1,000 gold pieces. With that money, you wouldn't have to worry about drinking and gambling anymore." Though Liang Yuzai did not speak, he agreed in his heart. When he returned home, Liang Yucai looked at Cuixian with sighs and tears, frequently lamenting about how life was too poor to continue. Cuixian ignored him, and Liang Yucai, in frustration, pounded the table, threw chopsticks and spoons around, and cursed the maid, displaying various ugly behaviors. One evening, Cuixian bought some wine and drank with her husband. She suddenly said, "Husband, you've been distressed over our poverty recently, and I feel quite ashamed that I can't help alleviate your difficulties. I don't have anything extra, but I do have this maid. If we sell her, we could at least get some money to help with household expenses." Liang Yucai shook his head and said, "She's just a maid. How much can we really get for her?" They continued drinking, and Cuixian added, "Is there anything I wouldn't bear for you? The only thing I can think of is that since we are so impoverished, staying together would only mean a lifetime of suffering for both of us. How can we look forward to a better future? Why not sell me to a wealthy family instead? This way, it would benefit both of us, and the money we get might be more than selling the maid." Liang Yucai pretended to be surprised and said, "Do we really need to do this?" Cuixian insisted, with a very serious expression. Liang Yucai's face immediately showed joy and said, "Let us think it over thoroughly." He then arranged through a favored palace eunuch to sell Cuixian to the government as a courtesan. The eunuch personally came to Liang Yucai's home, was very pleased with Cuixian, and, eager to secure her immediately, drew up a contract offering 800 cash. The deal was about to be finalized. Cuixian told Liang Yucai, "My mother often worries about our poverty. Since we are now parting ways, I must go home for a few days to visit her. Moreover, since our relationship is ending, how can I not inform my mother about this matter?" Liang Yucai worried that her mother might oppose the arrangement, but Cuixian said, "This decision is mine, and I guarantee she won't obstruct it." Liang Yucai agreed to her request. In the middle of the night, they finally arrived at her mother's house. When they knocked and entered, they found the residence to be beautifully decorated, with luxurious pavilions and numerous servants coming and going. Liang Yucai was astonished, as he had never visited his mother-in-law's home despite being Cuixian's husband for over a year. Cuixian had always stopped him whenever he mentioned visiting her mother's house, so this was his first time seeing it. He was worried that her wealthy family might be reluctant to let Cuixian become a concubine or courtesan for someone else. Cuixian led Liang Yucai upstairs. Mrs. Yun was surprised to see them and asked why they had come. Cuixian complained, "I always said he was unfeeling and heartless, and now it seems I was right." She took out 2 gold ingots from her clothes and placed them on the table, saying to her mother, "Fortunately, this money was not earned by this vile man. I am returning it to you now." Mrs. Yun was astonished and asked for an explanation. Cuixian said, "He intends to sell me, so this money is of no use to me now." She then pointed at Liang Yucai and scolded him. "You are truly a wolf, a rat. In the past, you carried burdens, covered in dirt, like a ghost. When you approached me, you didn't even wash off the sweat and dirt, and your filth nearly collapsed the bed. Your feet were covered in thick cracks that made me nauseous all night. It was only because you married me that you were able to live comfortably and eat your fill, no longer looking so detestable. Now that my mother is here, am I lying about you?" Liang Yuzai, hearing this, lowered his head and didn't dare make a sound. Cuixian continued. "I know I do not have the beauty of a city's jewel, and I cannot marry into a noble family, but even a man like you, I dared to marry. I have never mistreated you. Don't you have any sense of our marital bond? Do you think I couldn't build a house or buy good land myself? You, with your poverty and beggar-like appearance, are not a suitable partner for a lifetime." As she spoke, the maidservants surrounded Liang Yuzai, holding hands. Hearing Cuixian's scolding, they joined in, shouting, "He should be killed. Why waste words with him?" Liang Yuzai, in great fear, knelt and begged for his life, repeatedly apologizing. Cuixian, still furious, said, "Selling one's wife is already a heinous and cruel crime, but it's not the worst of sins. How could you have the heart to sell your wife to become a courtesan?" Before she finished speaking, everyone was so enraged that their eyes seemed ready to burst. They began stabbing Liang Yuzai with hairpins and scissors. Liang Yuzai cried out in agony, pleading for mercy. Cuixian then stopped them, saying, "Stop. Even though he is unfeeling and heartless, I cannot bear to see him trembling in such a pitiful state." With that, she led everyone downstairs. Liang Yuzai sat there for a long time, and when he noticed that the sounds around him had stopped, he decided to try to escape quietly. Suddenly, he looked up and saw the stars twinkling, with the eastern sky beginning to lighten, and the wilderness was shrouded in a bleak, gray expanse. The lights in the room suddenly went out, and immediately after, the house mysteriously disappeared. He then realized he was sitting on a sheer cliff. Liang Yuzai looked down and saw an abyss so deep that it was unfathomable, which terrified him, fearing that he might fall. As he shifted his position, there was a loud rumble, and the rocks began to collapse. A withered tree growing halfway down the cliff miraculously caught him, preventing him from falling. However, the tree only supported his abdomen, leaving his hands and feet hanging in the air with no support. Looking down, the depth was vast and unknown. He dared not turn around, and his cries for help were both terrifying and hoarse, his body swollen and weak, with no strength left in his eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or any part of him. As the sun gradually rose, Liang Yuzai was finally discovered by a woodcutter. The woodcutter brought a rope, lowered it down, and helped Liang Yuzai up to the top of the cliff, but by then he was already on the verge of death. The woodcutter carried Liang Yuzai back to his home, where the door was wide open and the place was in a state of disrepair, resembling an abandoned temple. The bed, chest, and furniture were all gone, leaving only some old and broken furniture, like a dilapidated bed and table. Liang Yuzai lay feebly on the bed, and when he was hungry, he would ask the neighbors for food. Soon after, Liang Yuzai's swollen sores began to fester and turn into ulcers. The villagers, who already despised his character, now scorned him even more. With no other options, Liang Yuzai sold his remaining house and took refuge in a cave, frequently begging on the streets with only a knife for company. When someone suggested he trade the knife for food, he refused, saying, "I live in the wilderness and need to guard against tigers and wolves. The knife is for self-defense." Later, Liang Yuzai encountered the friend who had previously advised him to sell his wife. Liang Yuzai approached him and, in a moment of opportunity, suddenly drew his knife and killed the man. The local constables arrested him and took him to jail. The officials, having investigated the reason for his crime, felt sympathy and refrained from torturing him. Instead, they confined him in prison. Not long after, Liang Yuzai died of illness in jail. At the end of the story, the author adds this commentary. Is it really worth trading a wife with eyebrows like distant mountains and a face like a lotus, one who would endure poverty with you, for money and status? One had poor character and yet blamed those friends who encouraged his misdeeds. Therefore, as a friend, one should not speak recklessly without considering the consequences. When such loose-living individuals lead others into vice and crime, they may not be hated until the misdeeds are exposed. However, no one thanks the misguiding ideas once the victim is stripped of clothes, his wife is in rags, and he faces countless reproaches. At such times, feelings of despair and bitterness continually haunt him. In the cold night, lying on a grass mat, unable to sleep, he recalls his former glory in his current helplessness, and blames those who caused his downfall. Weak people may curse their misfortune while sitting in their tattered blanket, while stronger ones may endure the cold, strip naked, light a fire, sharpen a knife, and seek revenge even before dawn. Therefore, I believe that advising others with good intentions is like offering an olive branch, while leading them astray with evil thoughts is akin to giving them spoiled meat. Therefore, one should be objective in considering friends' opinions and not accept them blindly. Those who offer advice should also be mindful of their words and actions. Alright. That's all for today's ghostly tale, Cuixian. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.